Previously on episode 1, what was covered in that story was effectively the genesis of what happened. My grandmother receiving a phone call from the police officers notifying her that my father had been involved in a life-altering accident. I spoke about the preceding events from that night, how it affected me and the subsequent events from that moment. So today, as a continuation on from yesterday, I'll be speaking on when I saw my father for the first time, which was in the ICU unit. That's where I ended the episode yesterday, so this will be somewhat of a part 2 continuation, along with a quad-focused leg day today. So, yeah. So now we've arrived from that journey after seeing my father's accident. I remember that day we were all at the table. It was so gloomy, and you could see the faces of especially my sister, my mother and my grandmother. They wanted to hear, but they didn't want to hear at the same time. But I suppose in some respect they needed some form of closure about the accident. And my grandfather obviously led the conversation on that matter. I think it was 2 days later that we went back to the capital, which again is like a 2-hour drive, to finally see my father, who was held in the intensive care unit. And boy, that was a lot. All right. So we've arrived at the hospital. I don't necessarily recall too much what actually happened in the lobby area, but walking into hospital, it's always an eerie feeling because, you know, life and death occurs in that place. My grandfather spoke to me outside and he said something on the lines of, you know, you're not allowed to see him because of the condition that he's in, and it's going to be very traumatic or something of that nature. If anyone's been in an ICU ward, you'll know why. All right. I remember being in the lobby of just outside the IC ward, and my grandmother and my grandfather come out. I think it was my mother or my grandfather at the time when they said, you know what, I think it's best you come see your dad. And I didn't know this at the time, but by the accounts of the doctors, it was looking like he wasn't going to make it. I know his last moments, so it was important that we went in. I remember when we walked in, it's very similar to what you see in the movies, where it's just, you become shell-shocked. You see other people as well who are in critical conditions. I remember seeing this gentleman in a bed to my left, and his whole chest was just completely broken, on life support as well. At this point, walking past those other patients, we're approaching the room where my father was being kept in. I remember the doctor was standing outside, effectively just signaling us in. It's hard to describe what that's like, because as you walk into the ward, you're seeing your father pretty much lifeless. Oxygen pipes down his throat. These beeping machines were sort of firing off. And you don't know what to make sense of it all, because for one, all those noises are just very disorientating. Two, your father in a bed just without life, being supported by machines, it's hard to quantify those emotions into words. It was the first time I broke down. A climax of all those emotions and thoughts that accumulated from the moment I heard the phone call to going to the police station, coming back home, the journey there. That was the tipping point where I remember just breaking down. I remember my grandfather started to usher me out the room. No, please go. I don't care. No, take care. What's your name, by the way?
Melissa.
Melissa, Mark.
Mark.
Nice to meet you.
MM.
My
initials MM.
Okay. Nice. Take care. I will be, yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, being ushered out by my grandfather out of that ward into the lobby, and I just remember him embracing me. What could he have done, right? In that moment, all you can do is just be with your grandson. God, I don't remember going back in. You remember the smells, you remember the sounds as well, and it's also, it's in your mind. It follows you wherever you go. A few moments later, I remember my mom came out as well. So did my grandmother and my sister. And bear in mind, my sister's 1 year younger than me, and my sister's always handled things well. Yeah. At this point, moving away from that whole interaction with my grandfather in the lobby, we didn't spend much time. I think we went for some lunch at one of the malls nearby. Yeah, you don't have an appetite for these things. But the journey home, very silent and eerie, as you can imagine. But I remember going back to school and I was in standard 6. So in Botswana, where I'm from, that was the second to last year of primary school. Don't ask me what the equivalent is in the UK, I'm actually not entirely too sure. One of the hardest things I remember and always associating is the talks and the whispers of the other kids. And bear in mind, most of these guys were all my friends, but we still had other grades and, word of mouth travels. And the thing is, in schools, particularly South Africa and Botswana, every morning your parents sort of drive you to school, drop you off, and it's the same thing, they come and pick you up. Sense how difficult that was for her as well, because in her mind, for what I know now, time was ticking because we didn't know where that external funding was going to come from. At this point now, my father's job is in jeopardy. That's all up in the air. And especially in Africa, the man is the provider. He's the breadwinner. Now you take that away from the hierarchy of a family structure, it flips everything on its head. School at this point, for me, was pretty much clock in, clock out, just show up. But I was so withdrawn from everything. I already had been diagnosed with ADHD beforehand. Didn't even make my situation better because all you can do is think about, one, your father, and two, how life is going to now unfold for not just yourself but your family as well. So the head-on collision that he was involved in was so severe that it left him in a coma for 3 months. He was staying in the capital for that amount of time. If I'm honest, I don't necessarily recall the times that we would go and visit him. Obviously, logistically, it was quite far, but I believe it was on the weekends we would go. Because thankfully, he didn't pass, despite the accounts of what the doctors were saying, hence why we needed to see him when I was in the ICU ward. So fast forward about a couple of weeks, maybe a month. Though my father's condition was stable, he was still in a coma. So even though I mentioned that my father was in the coma for 3 months, which would, lead you to think that he eventually woke up, which he did. But in those months that we were just going through the motions, there was a moment where he started to show signs of, I think his brain started firing off signals that he was aware of his surroundings, though he wasn't awake. He was able to respond with finger movements and twitching of the eyelids. Some time had passed and he was transferred to my town because his condition was somewhat stable, despite him still being in a coma. Now, the moment my father woke up and we went to visit him, imagine a rugby player, that's how built my father was. He was a big man, stocky, and a man's man. When I saw him in that ward in my hometown, he was a skeleton. I remember he was laying on a mattress on the floor. He didn't have one of those hospital beds for whatever reason, I don't know, but my father was bald and he had his hair grown out and he had this long beard, but he looked like I didn't know who he was. I couldn't recognize him. When he saw me and when he saw my sister, he also didn't really know who we were, but I could see he was trying to make sense and some sort of flashbacks were coming to his mind that these are your children. And I remember my sister's name is Bianca, and he would call my sister Barney all the time. Barney, where's Barney? So a slight deviation in name, but he was almost there with it. So I don't recall the amount of time he actually spent in the transferred hospital. But I believe it was a month just to sort of get restabilized and fed, because like I mentioned, my father was pretty much a skeleton at that point. But now considering the next sequence of events that actually happened, from him getting released from hospital, coming back to the family home, I think I'll draw this episode to a close, because that's a different beast of events in of itself. So I'll end this with some and the thing is, I could continue with what happened. Oh my goodness. I could continue with the sort of the next episode, but so many other things tie into, I guess you would call it episode 3. So yeah, I need to be a lot more structured with my speaking, because as much as I can live through and revisit what I had been through as a child and subsequently then through adolescence and so on and so forth, there needs to be, speaking for myself, there needs to be a better structure, because for one, this is so uncomfortable for me to do, but I know that I'm reminded of my post I put on Instagram once a couple of days ago, that irrespective of what you do, people are going to judge you, mock you, criticize you, irrespective. So just do it anyway. And yeah, it may sound morbid, but when you put everything into perspective, I'm going to die one day, and so will everybody else. So you might as well live. Yeah, catch you on the next one.